Welcome to the latest Watercolors Aquarium Gallery podcast, brought to you from the Aquarium Rush Studios in lovely downtown Grand Rapids, Michigan. My name is Ben.
I'm Amy.
And I'm Charles.
So today we're talking about a topic that comes up here in the shop all the time. It's common where we get people for those of you that are not regulars in the shop, maybe because, I know one of you lives in like New Zealand or something like that.
We've gotten to New Zealand. We've gotten Sweden, UK. I don't know. Maybe we need, I think New Zealand, we're not going to get farther than that. That's literally the other side of the planet.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I love to hear people chime in where they're listening from. It's very exciting.
That is very cool. So we are a major planted aquarium store. That's all of our freshwater aquariums except 2 that we sell fish out of are full of live plants as well. And that's how we sell them. We kind of push the idea that planted aquariums are, I'll say it, better and more fun and accessible to everyone and almost, maybe not almost. So most aquarium fish that are available in the hobby can go into a planted aquarium. Most? Yeah, I'm going to say that. I'm going to say most. There's some herbivores out there, but...
If we wanted to debate that, we would have to get into, are you talking about like in volume, number of fish, or just the varieties that are available?
Let's go sheer number of species. I'm going to go...
52% of species in the hobby probably can go in a planted aquarium, and I say that's most.
All right.
76% of all statistics are made up on the spot.
Yep.
Right.
We'll let you decide if that one was or not.
But anyway, that's how our store is set up. So as a result, we get a lot of people that come in the store and go, hey, live plants look kind of cool. I think I want to do plants. What do I got to do?
Yeah, and often it's the very tentative, well, I don't know, do you think I could keep a plant in my tank too? And then they get blown away by the, yes!
I like to, I'm a little bit sarcastic with some of our customers, and I like to be like, probably. Like, that's the honest to God answer. Like,
Do you have a goldfish? Probably you can't then. Do you have a silver dollar? Okay, probably you can't then. Do you got a bunch of tetras and a bunch of Danios and some Cory cats? You can do plants.
Yeah, do you have a light that turns on and off again? You can probably do plants.
You can do plants. Not every plant, not all plants.
But enough.
If there's not something that's going to eat it, there is a plant for every aquarium. As long as you have at least some light.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And even in some cases, that doesn't need to be a lot.
No, my wife, let's start with my wife's tank.
Oh, that's a great example.
This really cool, it looks a little bit like a brandy sifter betta bowl, but it's almost 5 gallons.
Yeah, it's a really cool little glass thing.
Yeah.
I don't even know what that's supposed to be for.
I don't know.
A vase.
Some fancy vase, or if you really want to get drunk.
Talk about a fishbowl cocktail, man.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's it. But it is literally 5 gallons. And there's no light. It's in a darkish corner of the house. And there's live plants in there, and they do great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember I used hornwort in the centerpieces for my wedding. And before it, I was keeping it in an unlit, like, open bucket on my floor. And it was fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hornwort.
And it turned itself into its own little aquarium because it had all sorts of snails and little scuds and, bugs crawling around in it. And it was fun. It works.
Yep. I love it.
Can be that simple.
Right. And so that plant in that tank is anubias. And most of the available species of anubias plants, everybody should start with. I shouldn't say that. Not everybody should start with those. But if you're unsure about whether or not you can successfully keep plants, boom, go with anubias.
Yeah, Anubias is a pretty safe bet, no matter what you're doing.
Internet guides will always try to lump Anubias and Java Fern together and just say, like, either of those are equally easy and everybody can do them. I definitely would put anubias as much hardier, at least for us here, than Java fern.
I think a lot of those internet guide people have different water than we have.
Yeah, I think
Java fern doesn't like it as hard as we have it.
exactly. That's my theory about it. There are other issues with it, but like I've heard people like come in disappointed because they tried to grow Java fern because it's on that list, and like they're like, it didn't do that great. I'm like, good, mine looks terrible too, so I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
And there are just certain conditions, but anubias is almost never that happens to me, that I sell an anubias and someone comes back like disappointed because it died or didn't grow. Usually it's starting to grow algae because it's growing too slowly and something else is out of whack, but that's not the anubias' fault.
No, not at all.
Yeah, and that's one thing I think people really don't appreciate about anubias is like as a genus, because they're all almost as easy to take care of as each other. Yeah. And it's like there's a great variety of them. They come in different colors, different textures, different shapes. And I'm like, you could very easily do an entire aquascape with just different species of anubias, and it would not look boring.
The different texture in some of those leaves even just give it that cool effect. Okay, so let's say somebody comes in the store and says, so I've given it a lot of thought. I've been thinking about it for like 5 minutes, and I think I'm ready to take on the challenge of plants. And I have my 15-gallon tank with my beta fish and some other, I don't know, tetras or something, and my blue gravel and
whatever light the kit came with.
Yeah, whatever kit. I don't know. It was a kit, so it's just a normal kind.
It's one of those LEDs, but it looks pretty bright.
Yeah.
Good LED lighting is my favorite phrase.
Right. Yeah.
I pretty much off the bat will tell them, yes, you can grow plants. Like, that's a good place to start that conversation.
I always start with, what are your goals?
Yeah.
Do you want to have some plants in there, or do you want to have a beautiful planted aquarium?
Mm-hmm. Definitely different conversations.
Right. But, okay, so this is my tank, and I don't want to change anything. I just want plants.
Then it becomes a conversation of, at least for me, I don't want to speak for you guys. For me, it becomes a conversation of, all right, well, what kind of plants do you want? If you want some of the rooting plants, you're probably going to have to use root tabs or something like that. And you're probably looking at something like Crips or Amazon swords if you're willing to feed it.
See, if they've got blue gravel, I'm going to steer them towards epiphytes no matter what.
Yeah, epiphytes and floaters are the best friends of the tentative planet aquarist.
Yep.
If you can get past the substrate question, like that's going to be the biggest areas that people slip up, because they always want to look at every plant, and you're like, if you don't want to have at least acceptable substrate, it's only epiphytes and floaters.
Yeah.
Which, if you have the conversation in such a way that, okay, if you only have a 15-gallon aquarium, you can't do bigger fish. You can only do smaller fish. So you can have that conversation where no matter what, how your setup is, you're going to have to make some choices, right? If you want blue gravel, I don't know why somebody would want blue gravel, honestly. Sorry to all those people out there with blue gravel. No, I'm not a fan. I understand if you like it. That's fine. I don't. But if you want blue gravel, you're not going to have a lush. You know what? I'm taking that back. Sure, you can.
Yeah, you're just not going to have a lush rooted plants.
Right. You can fill that sucker with anubias, and in 15 years, those anubias will be big enough to fill the whole tank because they're so glowing.
Mm-hmm. So maybe we should talk about what plants we would recommend for that type of system. And I would say that goes for any coated substrates are not great for plants. We really don't know what's in those coatings. The roots can't really penetrate the actual...
It's plastic.
Yeah, it's plastic. Basically, there's nothing valuable there for roots to deal with. So if you've got an uncoated gravel, that's still fine. It's just those rocks that are coated in plastic. Roots can't access the pores of the rock, and whatever is used in that coating could leach things that could be dangerous for the plants. it doesn't work. That's probably the simplest way to put it. For whatever reason, and I don't even have a good, other than that the roots don't like it. It's as simple as I can put it. It's as complicated as I can put it too.
It's the definition of inert.
Yeah.
It is a substrate that has absolutely zero interaction whatsoever. Whereas any of the natural rock substrates, those are close to inert, but not really. I mean, there's still some pores there that can hold some nutrients for the plants and mineralization.
I would almost argue that the plastic coated gravels are sterile, because at least if you have an inert natural substrate, at least those pores, the plants may not be able to get anything from it, but at least they can attach to that.
Yeah.
You know?
Plastic's really slippery.
Yeah. So that's a situation where epiphytes and floaters. The other is just pure white sand. I mean, you can get some stuff to root in it, but nothing really wants to.
Right.
You're not going to get the type of growth that you want. You're probably going to end up disappointed with some stunted plants if you try and grow things just in regular inert sand.
A straight silica.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have seen some people, and I'm not endorsing this as a strategy. I think that is amazing, but I have seen a lot of people have decent, fair success with Italian Val in sand.
Yeah, I can see that.
And I say that as if you want sand and you want something rooted, I think that's your only bet. I'm not saying it's your only option. I think it's your only bet.
Italian Val's really good at running across substrates that are mediocre.
Yeah.
It can just do that.
It only needs to root in I don't know, a quarter of an inch. So it's it can make do.
Yeah. So I think those are the scenarios where we're sticking to those types of plants. Do we want to run through a list of the plants that we think would work for this in a very low tech, low to moderate light setup?
With bad substrate.
With bad substrate.
Yeah.
Anubiases, we already covered that. Java ferns, we did mention those two. Mosses, fantastic.
Booses.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. You can do booses in those tanks.
What? You can do hip, trendy plant
I know.
epiphytes.
Booses are so cool.
If they're expensive, they must need CO2, right?
Right.
No.
So one of the things to remember in a situation like that is energy in, energy out. So if you're not putting a lot of energy into an aquarium, whether that's the form of light or nutrients, you don't get a lot of energy out. So all of these plants that we're going to keep in this low-tech tank are going to be slower growing plants. Mm-hmm. I think without exception. Yeah, it has to be without exception, because if you're going to grow fast, you're going to use up nutrients and you're going to take a lot of light.
With a notable exception that isn't even an exception, it just skips that rule.
You talking about duckweed?
I'm talking about floaters. Yeah. They can grow really fast, but also they're 2 inches from the light, so they are getting high
And
light.
have access to atmospheric CO2.
Yes, and all the nutrients in the tank, so they kind of get to cheat, but that means you can sort of skip a lot of those issues that you'd have otherwise, block the light out to the bottom level of the tank, so you're not going to grow a lot of other plants. But a lot of the times in a setup like this, you do have a good amount of decor on the bottom and in the mid-ground. Nobody wants just a bare tank, so if you're starting there, adding some floaters to the top could be a good way to sort of even out the decor that you're using, even if it's not fully natural, and still get the benefits of a planted aquarium, of which there are many besides just the looks.
Yeah, for sure. Something to keep in mind when you look at, so everybody's sitting at your computer, or when you get home, if you're listening to us on your drive home, just Google aquascape and take a look at a lot of the winners from some of the aquascaping contests over the last 4 or 5 years, and really maybe even just over the last 2 or 3 years, and take a look at how many of those plants are actually epiphytes. We watched Dennis Wong do an amazing aquascape at the Aquatic Gardeners Association convention in 19, right?
Yes.
Or was that 18? No, it was 19. 19, there we go.
I'm wearing the
She's
t-shirt.
wearing the t-shirt. Yes, 2019. And he didn't use any good substrate in that tank because he used all epiphytes.
And it was stunning.
It was gorgeous.
Yeah, it might not be easy to just throw together a Dennis Wong aquascape if you're got your guppy tank already going, but the principle still stands.
Yeah, and I wanted to take a moment and just appreciate the level of craftsmanship these competitive aquascapers take, because like, isn't the average like competitive aquascape like 8 gallons?
There are a lot of 8-gallon tanks.
It's stupidly small, and it's like you get that much perspective in like 8 inches. Like, what?
Right.
That's amazing.
They're going to take 3 or 4 months getting the aquascape just right. That means moving stuff around. Just moving stuff around.
Yeah, adding little details, ripping things out if they don't work, diagnosing, I'm sure, 100 different little, this plant isn't perfect, how do I tweak it without getting algae?
Right. Sometimes 6 or 8 weeks before they even add water.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I felt like, I wanted to appreciate that craftsmanship, and then step back and say, when people say, why doesn't my tank look like that? That's why. It's
Spend 2 hours a day on it every day for the next 6 months, and it can probably look like that.
Yeah, and it's just like, I'm not going to spend the time doing that,
and
personally.
It is a function of skill, but in a lot of ways, if you just throw time at it, you will get there eventually. Like, you could start from pretty humble beginnings and just add little bits and pieces continually over time with a fairly decent eye and get close to what you want it to look like. You can't, it takes either time, money, or like expertise, and you gotta have to figure out how these things work together.
Right.
And usually all 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a bit of a digression, but talking about the dream tank is probably a good thing to mention here.
It's something to always strive for, and it never happens overnight, and you need to be okay with that, because that's, for me at least, the fun of having a tank.
Right.
And a lot of times just making that jump into planted is the first step towards the aquascape that you actually really want someday.
Right. So the dream tank is going to be a balance of light, CO2, nutrients, substrate, filtration.
Mm-hmm.
So the dream tank in your, we'll go back to that 15-gallon tank, is going to be a canister filter, a twin star light, a CO2 system, Amazonia, aqua soil, or stratum, or one of those killer soils.
Yeah, and at least 2 hours a week to take care of it.
Yeah, and if you're doing that tank, what plant do you want? You just blindly throw a dart at a list, and you could probably go just about any plant you want. As soon as you start to take step back from that setup, you just start knocking some off the list, saying, you know what? I want a smaller light. I guess I have to take my Pogostemon hell fries off the list. I don't feel like I want to do a CO2 system. I'm going to get a smaller light, no CO2. I'm not going to go for the bright red plants. I'm going to go for some of the dark red plants and the good green plants. And just keep knocking off the list with where you don't want to put the resources, and come up with your plant list that way.
Yeah, I run a low light, virtually no tech tank at home that only has sand as a substrate. It's a 10-gallon, so my aquascape in that tank is 2 big rocks. And it takes up about 80% of the space. I mean, there's swimming space up and around, but in terms of floor space, it might even be more than 80. My rocks are my substrate in that tank. I grow mosses, anubias, java fern, bulbitis. Doesn't need a lot of light. The duckweed fills in, whatever. Scoop it out, not a big deal. That tank is super easy. 20% a week water change, growing shrimp in there. It looks great. It's got that bright white sand.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah, it's a great tank.
I like it.
And it doesn't need to be complicated to look beautiful.
So what's the basic? All right, so then we just kind of, and on another podcast, we'll go into like the details of why the twin star, why the CO2 system, why all of those things. Step it back. Hey, I want to do my first planted aquarium. I don't want to spend too much money. I just want like the basic stuff so I can grow some good plants.
So this is going to be my follow-up question that I would ask the customer.
Yeah.
Are we modifying an already existing tank? Are we starting with a new tank? Like this is your second tank?
Starting over.
Okay. Probably point them in the direction of EcoComplete as your substrate.
That's where I usually end up too, is EcoComplete
Yeah.
instead of fluorite.
I wish I could convince more people to do the substrate swap. On smaller tanks, it's really, really easy if you don't
It
have
really
plants.
is.
And EcoComplete is the substrate to do it with because it's not going to give you the dustiness. So you don't even need to fully drain and start the tank over again.
Mm-hmm.
You just need to get everything out of there, drain 50%, scoop all your old stuff out, and pop it in there. And that's it.
So really, if you've got a 15-gallon aquarium, even let's go with a 20-gallon aquarium. Go buy yourself 4 big box home improvement store 5-gallon buckets. That's all it'll take is 4. Siphon water into 4 of those buckets, one at a time. Pull the decor out that you want to keep. Your cool rock, your cool piece of driftwood, put your fish in there. Let's say you already bought one anubias plant, put it in there. Drain the tank completely. Keep your filter media all intact. Keep it wet. Get that old blue gravel out of there.
Throw it in the garbage
Throw it in the garbage.
or gift it to a child or whatever.
You know, that's something that I've been thinking about lately when it comes to kids in aquariums. But that I'm digressing there. But yeah, I'm not so sure we wouldn't be better off if we started kids out right instead of trying to think that all of the bright collage of colors is what's going to make a kid happy.
I've never had a kid ask me where our blue gravel is.
No, they just want to see the pretty fish. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
It's
Like-
only, you're right. It's only ever the parents that ask me where those gravels are.
yeah.
Yeah, and that's the same for like princess castles and all that stuff. Like the kids, it's literally all about the fish. That's the
Right.
only thing that they care about is that they have a cool fish that they like.
Kids see in more detail than parents see.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the nature of their eyes. They're gonna see the smaller stuff. Mm-hmm. So if we're gonna go back to that same 15-gallon tank that you finally talked to, getting that blue gravel out and putting the princess castle somewhere else, maybe on the dresser somewhere because you just can't get rid of it. Put the EcoComplete in, grow some cooler plants. Now you've got some cover and put some moss in there, put some shrimp in there, and start that. Hey kids, how many shrimp can you find today? That's gonna. Yeah, a kid might just have that initial check out my alien themed fish tank.
Yeah.
They're going to love that for like 5 or 10 minutes.
Everyone loves babies more than they love plastic.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're talking about
I know,
substrate.
yeah.
But that's it's a 1 hour, $25 upgrade for your aquarium that increases the ability of what you can do with it by double, I think.
Tons.
At least double. Now
Hugely
you can
better.
pack it with plants. Now you go from, okay, I've got about a dozen species I can consider that I'm going to make sacrifices on how they look, to now I've got a world of options that I can make this look how I want it to. And no, you might not be able to grow the exact plant that you saw in some aquascape on Instagram, but you can have an amazing tank with many different colors, many different varieties of plants. That's a huge difference.
And can we take a step back here? Can we explain why in this situation specifically, we're arguing that EcoComplete is better than fluoride? I know you touched on it a little bit,
Yeah.
but I want us to spell it out a little bit because I know we're going to get that question.
When all is said and done, I honestly like fluorite a little better than EcoComplete. EcoComplete's just way less work, and it's
Easy.
gonna work well.
Yeah, I had one of my good buddies stop in to set up a tank the other week, and I was really busy that day, but I did walk him through like all the stuff he needed to do, and I sold him fluorite, and I always tell people, and I didn't tell him to rinse it.
Oh no!
And it was just complete gray mess. He didn't rinse it at all. He had to wait a few days. I told him like, okay, well you can just wait it out. You can do a huge water change and start again, but this is just how it is. And especially if you're changing out something to an existing tank, the least drama is the best option.
Yeah.
If you do decide that you want to go fluorite, here's the process. And I've done it many times, but it's a big job. So per bag of fluorite, it's going to probably take 20 minutes per bag to rinse it. And so what I usually do is, I think there's a 15.4 pound bag or something like that. Pour about a quarter of that. Maybe you can go up to a half of that into a 5-gallon bucket. Fill it up about halfway with water, swirl it around, pour it off. Do that 37 times. Put that rinsed stuff into the tank, and then take the next quarter or third of the bag, rinse that 37 times. And if you do that, fluoride is fantastic. And really, I love it. It's
An amazing product.
Yeah.
The strategy I use is slightly different, but very similar. I like to run it under a tub, and I use a wooden spoon to stir it, because if you do it with your hand,
It chews up.
you're going to get raw
Yeah.
fingertips.
Yeah. At one point, I was using so much fluoride in some of my planted tanks at home for a while when I had 15 of them, that I took a 1-gallon ice cream bucket and I drilled a bunch of holes in it. And then I took a piece of vinyl screen and I hot glued the vinyl screen into the bottom of the bucket. And I poured it through. And actually, it worked really, really well.
I love it because that's so much effort, but it's still less effort than rinsing
Yeah, that's...
and yet we still absolutely recommend that substrate. But
It's so good,
yeah.
but you have to work with it.
I have won and lost aquascaping contests because of fluoride.
Yeah, I believe it.
Yeah.
And when speed is a factor and you've got all your fish in a bucket,
Eco-complete is the way to go in
Yes.
that situation.
Right. So, sorry, guys from CChem. I know you guys have come up with... They made a rinse bag.
they did.
It just didn't take.
Yeah.
I've never actually even seen one. Supposedly, it's pretty good. It's the same concept that it is with my ice cream bucket, right? It's just you keep it all in the bag. It's a locking, a resealable bag, and you open the bag and you put it in the sink and you can pour water through it, and it's got a mesh bottom, and so it rinses it out that way.
Yeah. That is.
It's supposed to
a
work
cool
really
idea.
well, but they're a lot of work.
Yeah. But now if you've done that, now you can grow crypts.
Yes.
And that's just like anubias, just like the same thing we said earlier. They're just going to keep growing. You don't need a lot of light. And you could do an aquascape entirely of crypts and it would look finished and complete and not like you're missing anything.
I have a tank at home that it has nothing but crypts except 2 Java ferns, which I'm eventually, as they get bigger, I'm going to swap out for 2 buces.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Because I looked into it, at least from what I can find, there's not an epiphytic crypt. So I can't have my true crypt aquascape.
I don't know of... No,
So-
I don't know of one.
I would guess if there was one, it probably wouldn't be one that you could grow fully submerged.
Yeah, that's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you had that conversation with me, but I definitely had it with Amy at one point where I was like, I really wish I could pull up a crypt-only aquascape, but I really want something epiphytic in this tank to make it look...
Oh, I totally get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you do the booses, then it's kind of biotopy.
Yeah.
Right. And a boost is almost like halfway between a crypt and an anubias. So,
It is kind of.
yeah.
Since we brought boosts up again, can we have a quick blurb on why they're expensive and why we should be careful on where we're getting them?
Yes, please do.
Please.
So they're stupid expensive because they are so slow growing.
Yes.
And that is both a good thing and a bad thing because, I mean, I like to use them in 2.5 gallon betta tanks. So having a plant that isn't going to overrun the tank is really useful. But that's where that price tag is. A big part of that too is also demand, and they're also being unsustainably collected from the wild. So be very conscientious of where you are getting your buses and think carefully about what you will do with them as you're propagating them. Because if you buy a boost, I'm anticipating, or at least hoping, that someone's planning on keeping it for years. Just because a plant that awesome and that slow growing deserves that sort of commitment. So given the unsustainable wild harvest, try to find cultured ones, try to share what you have with other people. Let's do what we can to keep these really awesome plants around.
Yeah.
And it all contributes to the price. Like you can't really culture them commercially to meet the demand because of how slowly they grow. So now you're paying for each one to be imported in, and we're not getting any more at the rate that we can. So it's like scarcity and transportation costs and like very high demand all working together to make these very expensive plants. But you can get a single plant for fairly cheap, and that is definitely enough to start with. Like, it doesn't need to be the top fanciest booths in the world. Even just the simple green bucephalandras are gorgeous, very easy plants.
Super cool texture, super cool, deep, rich green color. They're all from Borneo, correct?
All the buses I know of are from
I
Borneo.
think that might be like a Borneo thing.
Yeah. So anyways, that's only relevant to, in case people don't know, a lot of the bettas I like to keep are from Borneo. So that's part of the appeal to me, because I was basically like, oh, so I'm going to start phasing out Java ferns and start replacing with buses because it's just mildly more accurate.
You know what one of my favorite things about Java ferns is? Not from Java.
Yeah, I know. Oops.
Java moss too. Not from Java.
It's just because of how energetic they make you.
Boo.
You know what the real reason is, right?
I actually don't.
They were they first came out of an exporter that was located in Java, but
Interesting.
harvested other places, shipped to there, exported out.
That is cool.
Came out of some guy from Java. I don't know where they're from originally. Let's go with Java from.
Works for me.
Right.
That's hilarious.
Yeah,
Okay, so we got our substrate changed out.
we do.
We can grow crypts, swords, stem plants.
Stem plants. Now you can start the stem plants.
Amy has a slight blurb on, and if I'm putting you on the spot and you can't spiel it out, feel free to cut this part out. But a lot of people will come in and ask me what the blurb is, like the distinction between keeping Rotalas and Luigia, and I don't quite get what they're getting at there.
I don't have a good, like, this is my quick answer to the difference between Rotalas and Ludwigias, but to me, Rotalas generally tend to do better in, and this is part of something we learned at the AGA, better in harder water, which is ours, with good root fertilization. Ludwigias tend to prefer softer water, and a lot of them can grow floating, so you sort of can't target them as easily. We don't tend to do as well with Ludwigias here as we do with Rotalas, just generally speaking. So for whatever one reason or another, there are a couple of Ludwigias that I recommend towards beginners, but if you're trying to get a little more like of the funky stuff, I'd usually point them towards Rotalas first. Like a Wallichii versus like the Ludwigia, I don't know, Cuba or something like that.
Parensis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think the essentially, so Vin Cuddy did a talk at the Aquatic Garden Association convention on Rotalas, and essentially I think what he was getting at, a little oversimplified, is that the Rotalas are going to be more root feeders and the Ludwigias are going to be more water column feeders.
Yeah. And that's like, we know how much of a generalization that is. Both can grow well both ways.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily what they would prefer.
The classic red Ludwigia, which is arcuata or repens?
Repens.
Ludwigia repens is super easy, and all kinds of people can grow that, and we grow that just fine. And Rotala macranda, easy, grow that just fine. Get a little more complicated, and things start to changing. Yeah, I love it when I start to explain to a newbie about how easy, and I am using those correctly, how easy stem plants are, right? And then when I tell them, when it gets too tall, you just snip it and replant that. I was like, what? You mean like it's like a free plant? Yeah, you can make it thicker. It's so cool.
It
I
is
love the
so
look on
cool.
people's faces when they have that. Whoa.
Yeah, stem plants are probably like, if slow growth discourages you, fill it full of stem plants.
Right.
Get some Rotala rotundifolia, get some Rotala macrandra, get wisteria, get any of those lower light stem plants grow fast and it's fun. Under like low tech conditions, it's not going to be like, oh, I have way too many. It's going to be like, I have so many.
I like that distinction.
And it's not something to be worried about. It's fun. I'm so happy whenever we get cuttings from anybody.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, you did it.
Yep. Yep.
And that's where you're going to get a lot of your easier reds and that kind of thing too, if color is really what you're looking for. Although I hate the distinction that apparently green isn't a color to most people. But do you have any colorful plants? They're green.
That makes them cool, you know.
Yeah.
There's some really cool aquascapes out there that are done just with green plants. And all the same color green, just with different textures.
Oh, that's
It could be a
beautiful.
really cool look. Yeah.
But there are some low-tech reds that you can get out of stem plants.
Yeah.
Ludovica ovalis is one of my favorites for that.
Yes.
It's going to get that pinkness towards the tips. Rotala rotundifolia as well.
Yeah.
Doesn't need a ton of light to get there, and it's really rewarding to just see those tops of it turn pink.
Just commenting on the green thing.
Yeah.
I'm genuinely trying to think of an aquascape in the last few years that had red in it that really caught my eye. And that's how strong my bias is against red plants.
Red has to be done just right. It's kind of like, I don't know, adding garlic to a meal to try to make it taste better, or putting too much hops in a beer to try to make it like trendy. Or
I wouldn't say like garlic. I would say like cilantro.
I love cilantro. It's
I
hard to
love
mess
it,
up
but
cilantro.
it's really easy to make that the only thing you taste.
Well, like it's not like it's the only thing that you taste. It's if you make a mediocre meal, you can add a ton of garlic and it will be a little bit better and it will be fine. If you make a really good meal with like a tinge of garlic, it just is that really the thing that finishes it perfectly. And red plants are like that too.
Right.
Like, it's a really easy way to make a focal point in an aquascape because your eye's just going to be drawn to that red and green contrast. But if you use it too much, your brain doesn't know what to do with that information and it's going to kind of scatter it.
It can make it look really unnatural.
Yeah, and cheap.
Cheap. Yeah. Look, I added red because it's dramatic.
And those deep reds do take a lot of skill to achieve. Like, you have to deliberately be going for that. And it's not just throw a big light on there. It's manipulate your circumstances to get it. But subtlety is better to me.
Yeah, well, red is really easy to overdo. Like, I know we're harping on this, but seriously, too much red and it becomes meaningless.
Unless it's all red.
Oh, that's really cool too.
All right, fine.
The Aquaflora Barclaya tank. So our friend Esther Moss at Aquaflora, which is looks like this amazing wholesaler out of the Netherlands. We cannot get their plants. But they did a 2 foot by 4 foot tank. So basically a 120 with only this plant called Barclaya longifolia. And it's this reddish pink with very little green in it. And it was just thick, solid. It was such a cool look.
Yeah. That's one of the best things about debating art, if you can even call it that, right?
I know, right? Yep.
Everybody's right, and if you do it on purpose, it's better than by doing it on accident.
I feel like this plays into my hand a little bit, though, because one of my big arguments I have with some of the people in the club is that I'm a strong proponent of just committing to one look. Instead of having 8 different types of plants, go with 1 or 2, or instead of having 3 types of fish, just have 1.
Yeah.
This tank is the exception to the red, where it's all red and it's all one shade of red and it's one plant and it works.
That monochromatic. Everyone's seen monochromatic art that draws you in. It could be done.
Yeah. It's impressive. This feels like a little bit of a digression, but I think it's actually really important in this conversation. And it's that like expectations versus reality situation. Yeah. Like this vision of what you think you want and what you're able to achieve kind of being a little bit different, and how to sort of cope with that if you can't afford or don't have the time for that kind of setup. Like if you're making the jump from just having a handful of guppies to having a planted aquarium because of the tanks that you've seen on Instagram.
We've talked to some of those people, and we've talked to some of those people that win awards, and the ones that win awards, I said it kind of offhandedly a little while ago, but it's 2 hours a day every day for 6 months that's literally what those people are doing.
Mm-hmm. And more like 6 hours or something the day they take the picture.
Yeah.
And there are probably plenty of times during that 6 months where that tank looks nowhere like the finished product, where it's full of algae, or these plants are just melting and they have no idea why. Yeah. And watching like a 30-second time-lapsed aquascape video on Instagram is going to make you think that that's the way they're all done. Right. And they are not.
They are not.
They are not. And those are all fresh tissue culture plants added to those time-lapse aquascapes. Mm-hmm. And do they post a picture a week later of what it looks like? Do they post it 2 weeks later? It might still look fantastic, but it's pretty easy to make plants look perfect when they've been grown in a lab. Yeah. So anyway, I could harp on Instagram expectations all day, and that could go way beyond this discussion. But
we all know about Instagram models. We should apply the same idea to our tanks.
Precisely. So that's a small part of this, but I think an important part of it. We should probably get back into practicalities again. Ben, do you want to take that over? I've got my rant out.
Yeah. So the person with the 15-gallon tank, and then the question we get asked all the time is, what light do I need for plants? And the answer is, what plants do you want to grow? Just like all of this. It's the limiting factor. And there's 3 considerations when it comes to how effective your light is going to be with your plants. And that's going to be color, intensity, and duration. Mm-hmm. Duration is one that we struggle with this one in the shop sometimes with like trying to figure out when we're like diagnosing an algae issue in an aquarium. We keep forgetting to ask, so how long are your lights on?
Yeah.
You could be doing everything right, but have your lights on too long and
everything's out the window.
And sometimes it's such a small difference. Like if you're running 12 hours, but your tank can only take 10. And sometimes even if you're running 10 hours and your tank can only take 8.
Right.
Like 2 hours could be the difference between algae explosion and gorgeous planted tank.
So essentially what's happening with algae in the tank with a planted aquarium is the availability of those other ingredients photosynthetic organisms need. So if you are running your tank for a certain amount of time, your plants are going to be the best at photosynthesizing. Algae is not as good at photosynthesizing as plants are. So those plants are going to be doing their thing, but just like people, plants need rest. So they cannot photosynthesize the entire time the lights are on. After somewhere between that 8 to 10 hour mark, like what Amy was talking about, and that depends on plants and temperature and all kinds of different things, and you know how Jupiter and Saturn are aligned that day,
and your personal terrible luck or good luck.
yeah. But once they've gotten past that 8 to 10 hour mark, they're done. They are not going to photosynthesize anymore, and so that energy, right? Light is energy. That energy going into the aquarium, everything in nature is opportunistic, particularly algae. So if that energy goes in, something is going to use it.
I like to phrase it as, after 10 hours, every hour of light is doing nothing but fuel algal growth.
Yep, that's perfect.
Yeah, and plants need to sleep too. Mm-hmm. And they sleep just as well with the light on as you do. Which is not well at all.
Exactly,
it's restless sleep. They need to like fully shut down and then gradually and gently wake up the next morning and be refreshed.
Exactly.
They will be stressed if you give them too much light.
A quick step with algae control: cut your light duration down to 8 hours.
Yeah.
Done.
Yeah. If your lights are on for more than 8 hours and you have an algae problem,
Cut it back to 8.
start there.
You might be able to bring it back up to 10 once you've gotten the algae problem under control. But start out with bringing it down to 8 hours.
And if you have a controllable or ramping light, that principle still applies.
Yeah.
Partial light, low light may be less of a contributing factor, but if you're getting 12 hours of light a day, whether it's at 10% or 100%, you're probably going to get algae.
It's still light.
It's still light.
Yeah.
Algae doesn't need much light.
So
get
have
that-
your ramp be 10 hours and have that, don't have 8 hours of peak, have a few hours in there of peak if you're
Right.
programming your light.
Bump it down to 6 for a while if you're trying to solve an algae problem.
Mm-hmm.
We get that question sometimes. So I really want to have my light on longer than that. What do I do? The answer is deal with algae.
Yeah.
Like if you want your lights on 14 hours a day, deal with algae. You'll have it.
Yeah. And the plants don't necessarily know what time it is outside, so set
Yeah.
it for when you're going to look at the tank. If you work night shift in your home all day, have it on all day. If you get home at 6 p.m. and stay up till 1 a.m., have it on at that time. It really doesn't matter unless you're getting a ton of ambient light.
Right.
Curtains are your friend, by the way.
My planted tank at home, the light turns on at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, turns off at midnight. I haven't cleaned the front glass on that tank in like 5 years. Not because I keep my tank dirty. There's no algae at all on the front glass of my aquarium.
Yeah, I think I have mine like
I think I saw one tiny speck.
I don't believe it.
I think mine. I have mine from 3 to 11 with a ramp. Like I've got it programmed with a little bit of ambient light in the room, and I get film algae where the light touches the glass, like where it kind of
yeah.
passes over,
Right.
and I get a little bit of hair algae. And to me, that is an acceptable algae level, and that's kind of perfectly right in the sweet spot of where I want.
Yeah.
Because I actually do want a little bit of it.
A little bit.
Yeah.
You know, things are balanced then.
Yeah, and I have fish that if I don't have a little bit of algae, will probably start eating my plants pretty quickly. So
You and your buffalo head
yeah, I have some barbs in there too who would probably really appreciate it as
yeah.
well. Yeah, I like setting myself up for failure, but
Yeah.
sweet spot. It's finding
spot.
that no matter what the tank is.
Yep.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I wanted to shift this particular part of the conversation a little bit. So let's say someone wants to upgrade their light for this
Right.
same tank.
Yeah.
Where would you point them in the direction?
So then we're going to talk about intensity and color because that's what the upgrade is going to be, right? Duration is how long your timer is set for.
Everybody needs to buy a Twin Star S light tomorrow.
Yes.
No, please don't.
No. So that's one of the things about some of these upgraded lights is unless you're going to upgrade everything, you don't necessarily want the top of the line Planet Aquarium light unless you also buy a dimmer.
Thank you. I was going to say, I've been pointing people in that direction a lot,
Yeah.
like in the last few weeks, because I've shifted my focus a little bit. Because I'm like, if you buy a dimmer and you get this light, it'll give you the option of upgrading everything else later without upgrading the light.
Right.
But if you're buying the top of the line light, you definitely need that dimmer.
So intensity, we're going to talk about the tripod. We've talked about it a couple of times in some of our other podcasts, but the tripod of light, CO2, and nutrients and how that applies to an aquarium. And if you think of those three things as the legs of a tripod, if you lengthen or shorten any one of those legs, the tripod falls over. So if you have all this intense light, but not enough CO2 or not enough nutrients, you just lengthen the one leg, that tripod falls over. What happens when the tripod falls over?
Everything
breaks?
algae.
Algae grows. Thank you. Algae grows.
Oh,
right?
fun fact. Flourish Excel is not a liquid CO2 supplement.
It is not.
If you want a really thorough explanation of that, check out our YouTube video.
Yeah.
So it's it's those three things as the tripod. And again, that goes back to plants can only photosynthesize so much. So if they're using up all of the available CO2 and all of the available nutrients, but there's more energy going in, that opportunistic algae gets to take over and use up that energy.
Mm-hmm.
That happens with nutrients as well. That doesn't happen quite as much with too much CO2. It definitely happens with not enough CO2.
Yeah, too much CO2 either means that your water's oversaturated and your fish are going to get sick.
You'll see them, they'll be at the surface going,
or it's just a waste.
Right.
Like, it's just going to evaporate out and whatever. I guess you're paying the extra pennies. Mm-hmm. Too much light, I think, is more often a limiting factor than not enough light. At least in my most recent experience with people who are struggling with their tanks.
Yeah. It's surprising how... I'm going to go back to my tank at home. It's a 90-gallon aquarium. I have all moderate to low light plants. So Cryptosteuriana, Crypt Balancea, Crypt Aponegetifolia, Anubias. I think that's it.
You have crinum in there.
My crinum. How did I forget my crinum calmastrata?
That's the best
my favorite
one.
plant.
It's the best.
Yeah.
That's like everyone's favorite plant that comes in the store.
So those are all tanks that can do well under low to moderate light. 90-gallon tank. I have a single 36-inch current True Lumen Pro 12K light. That's it.
I just had to chuckle a moment because when you look up Crinum calumnistratum online, everybody says it's a highlight CO2 plant.
Really?
Like, I've seen several sources that say you need highlight, you need CO2 to grow this guy.
I would like to talk to those people and show them the flowers that I get on my crinum.
I know. Every time I see that, I think of yours and I laugh.
I'd like to show them our low-tech plant, low-tech tank where that's the focal point.
Right. Highlight CO2, really.
Yeah, I've seen that in multiple places.
Send me the links. I want to...
Next time I see it, I'll have to tell you. It was like, I remember I saw that from somebody who, like, was a big aquascaping person or something like that, which you'd never use Crinum calumnistratum in a very precise, like, you know, it's a big plant. You don't use big plants in little aquascapes, but it just cracks me up. I had a good point about lighting. Oh, it was tank depth matters.
Tank depth matters, yes.
Like that one True Lumen strip on your tank is like moderate, like maybe low to moderate light.
Yeah.
On that 15-gallon, it's probably solidly moderate.
Oh, yeah.
That difference in depth makes a huge difference. So it can save you a lot of money on lighting. It works the reverse, though. If you go a little higher, that intensity is going to mean more to a smaller tank than it is to a deeper tank.
Yes. In our propagation department in the basement, we have those True Lumen Pros on 33 long tanks, which I believe are 12 inches deep.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And those two of those on that tank, we would call that highlight.
Yeah.
We're growing aerial columns.
Very
fine.
highlight.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you mean to tell me that water is really good at filtering light out?
Yes, I do.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Water filters out light in different wavelengths.
I'm trying to remember the exact statistic because we talked about it in a video we filmed back in like August, but I think it's 60% of red light is filtered out in the first 3 feet.
That's very possible.
It was something absurd.
Yeah.
And red light is gone entirely by 40 feet in depth.
That would, yes, I think
And
that
that
is exactly
one-
true.
That one I only know because if you're diving and you're below that depth and you cut yourself, your blood looks green.
Also, if you're diving and you're at that depth and you see a fish that normally would be red, it's black.
What?
Yeah. Lionfish, once you get down below 35, 40 feet, they look black.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that red color in fish that live in depth is actually a form of camouflage.
Right. Which also, by the way, is why very few fish that aren't nocturnal, that live in shallow water, are red. There
All
just
right,
aren't many.
fish nerds. I got one planted tank one. Can we please?
Oh, oh, that's right. We're talking about plants. Sorry.
But talking about the depth of lighting and stuff like that, it's another reason why planning out your tank before you set it up makes a big difference. If you want a 20 high versus a 20 long, well, your money towards lighting is going to go a lot farther in a 20 long.
Right.
It's not going to make the world of difference, but it might make just enough for you to grow dwarf hair grass versus not being able to.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So yeah, upgrading that tank. You want to upgrade your lighting? I think we're going to have to do a whole podcast on LED lights and the ones that we like. But there are reasons to use the True Lumen Pros. There are reasons to use the programmable Fluval.
I love them for people starting out.
Yeah.
You can start it out low. If you want more, turn it up.
Yep. We love our Twin Star lights.
Yeah.
We love our Kessel lights if we want to shine a spotlight on something.
Or you just want to really drive it down deep.
Yeah.
The Kessel I sold over the weekend, it was for a 32-inch deep tank.
Oh, perfect.
And I was like, this is what you want.
That's the plan.
And that Fluval light would be wasted on a tank like that. It's
Yeah.
not going to get that penetration that you need.
Amy's got her really cool AI primes that just rock out her
I
tank.
do love the freshwater AI Prime. It's the upgrade to the Fluval.
Yeah.
More light. I don't run high light in my big tank at home. I care more about the effect than the intensity. I don't grow anything that needs it.
It's a little better quality light. It's got way more programmability.
Yeah. And it's pretty.
It's pretty.
And that's all that matters.
Color is the one that we get asked about quite often. And we talked a little bit about, spectrum and what effect that has on plants. Plant color spectrum is figured out. If you're going to do plants and you're ready to buy a new light, buy one that says it's for Planet Aquariums. Is kind of step one. There are lights that make fish look pretty, and there are lights that grow plants.
That is, we keep digressing and getting into a little bit of deeper subjects, but that's so important for this because if you're making the jump, will my light work is a question. Oh, I've got one that changes, it can do white and blue. And that might not be enough for that funky plant that you want to grow.
Yeah.
If there's one, we talked about the substrate being a pretty cheap investment to upgrade. The light isn't, but
Right.
it might really be the difference between the planted tank you want and the planted tank that you don't.
Yeah, I want to throw this out here. A good Planet Aquarium light should, depending on how long you have it on in a day, should last you like 3 to 6 years.
At least.
At least.
Yeah.
And so when you're looking at that investment you're putting into it, don't think of it as a one-time purchase. Think of it as, this is a purchase I'm making over the course of X amount of time.
I'm going more like 5 to 10, and really, my current True Lumen Pro at home is 8 years old.
How long have we had that Kessel running on that 40? Because that's been here longer than I have.
It's
5
been here
years.
longer than I have.
That was the original when we built the store. We put that on that tank 5 years ago.
LEDs shouldn't burn out.
Yeah.
In a reasonable amount of time. But like in an aquarium, they are exposed to a little bit more like, oh, what's the odds that you're going to dunk it in the tank over 5 years or something like that? Like, get it damaged. But
I think the manufacturers call their expected lifespan 8 to 10 years.
Yeah.
Compare
I'm just
that
rounding
to-
down a little bit just because I assume
yeah.
you're going to do something. I'm going to do something silly in that amount of time. So let's just put it that way.
Compared to the fluorescents, which are $20 every 6 to 8 months.
Yeah, that's something that we almost don't have to have. The conversation we almost don't have to have anymore. I remember trying to convince people to go from high output T5s over to LEDs, and that was actually one of the big reasons we outfitted the whole store with the current True Lumen Pros. My last store we outfitted with high output T5s.
Yeah, I don't have that conversation much with hobbyists anymore, but I still have it regularly with the what'll it take for me to grow plants people.
Yeah.
And oftentimes it's a hardware store, like industrial bulb or something like that. Or it's a T8 that, whatever, like Aquarium aquarium bulb that's like daylight.
Those still come out. And if you want to grow anubias plants and some crypt plants, go for it. They'll be fine.
They will. Yeah.
and I'm going to keep plugging the video because I worked hard on these videos. But if you want a thorough explanation of light spectrums and why different wavelengths do different things, we do have a video on that. That one I'm specifically plugging because that was far outside of my wheelhouse in science. I don't want to talk about how much time I spent being ready to do that one.
We also have a lighting podcast episode too.
We do. All right. Nutrients.
I think people will be surprised at how little place nutrients take up in this discussion.
If you're doing a basic, simple, low-tech tank, don't worry about it.
Yeah, I tell people, I mean, do your plants look healthy? Yeah, then leave them alone. Like, if you start seeing yellowing, is it in your new growth or your old growth? Then you can start diagnosing it as, oh, I have a potassium deficiency. Treat it as it shows up.
Okay, so don't worry about it was oversimplistic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What do you want to get out of it? I guess maybe it comes down to like all of this stuff we've been talking about. What do you want to get out of it? You will get better growth. Dose it.
Yeah, plants will only use what they need. So if we're talking about this tripod, if you don't have the lighting there, if you don't have the CO2 there, you don't need to have the nutrients there either. And that's a terrible way to put that. But like, don't keep fertilizing for a low growth system because the fertilizer's just going to go like everything extra does to the algae.
Right.
So do your water changes because that will remineralize very well for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we actually, a few months ago, figured out I don't dose in any of my tanks. And this was back when I was doing all that testing for the different brands and stuff. And he and I managed to figure out that I do such large water changes so often that it functions as fertilizing.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Important nutrients. Nitrate comes from your fish waste.
Mm-hmm.
So does phosphate a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Phosphate also comes generously from our local tap water. Thank you very
Generously.
much, Grand Rapids. And potassium's the other big guy, which in a slow growth system is rarely an issue, but maybe the one that you need to target individually.
I dosed potassium years ago in the tank that I have now.
Yeah.
But I don't even dose that anymore.
Exactly.
But my plants grow very, very slowly.
Exactly.
And I'm okay with that. I don't that tank at home is set up to be as easy as possible, and it is. It's so easy.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that about that tank. I can come here and get all of the fix I need and look at all these amazing high-tech tanks, and I can even tinker and work on them.
Yeah.
When I come home, I want to sit down by my aquarium and
You just need a little slice of it. You don't
Yeah.
need you don't need to be fighting all the time with that tank.
exactly. If I didn't do it all day every day, then I would want something more complex. But it's perfect for that. But
I
it's
think
beautiful.
you owe it to our audience now, because you've talked about this tank enough.
Mm-hmm.
Can you take a photo of it, have it posted to the Facebook page, and explain what's in it and what you do?
Yes. Fine.
Yeah, because we're talking for good reason. It's
No, I
being
know.
brought up a lot in this episode.
Right.
A lot of people are going to want to try and emanate it, and they should.
Yeah. Yeah, I can do that. I don't know how you would emulate my substrate.
Let's just say eco-complete.
Yeah. Yeah.
It would accomplish the same goal.
It probably would. Yeah. It's a funky substrate.
It's
Okay, well,
okay
I'll
for
do
an
a video
aquarium to be easy.
I'll do it. Here's a teaser. Look for the upcoming YouTube video on my planted aquarium. Well, I will go into detail how I came up with the interesting DIY substrate formula.
All right, and save. He can't take it back now.
So nutrients. So you're going to up the light. You're going to up the CO2. Up the nutrients. Keep the tripod steady and even.
Especially if you haven't replaced your substrate and you just have like plain gravel or whatever. Root fertilization is easy mode to me.
Yeah, that's what I do with my crypts.
Yeah,
Liquid
they love
ferts need to be replaced so frequently and consistently to maintain growth. Throwing in a root tab underneath my thirstier plants,
Yeah.
it once a month is perfectly fine, and that keeps my crinum green. If it's more than a month, then the ends of some of the leaves start turning yellow. More than that, whole leaves start turning yellow. And then I throw it under, and then it's fine. It pops out a bunch of new growth.
I think our low-tech tank is a great example downstairs of why I like root tabs in my tanks at home, because it allows you to target feed your slower growing plants or the ones that aren't doing so well. Liquid ferts, you can't do that. So my example in that tank is, you know what does really well in that tank? The crinum. You know what doesn't do really well in that tank? The anubias. We can target feed one. I can't target feed the other one.
Right. And contrary to what some comments on some of our YouTube videos are, there are those plants that feed from the substrate more than the water column, and there are those plants that feed from the water column more than the substrate. It's a real thing, by the way.
It's just like there are people who are at very advanced topics who still misunderstand the basic nature of plants. Plants will take nutrients wherever they are able. Some will grow better if you feed them in certain ways. Most plants can take purely water column fertilization. Is that what they necessarily want? No. Most plants can take almost purely root fertilization. Is that what some of them want to grow as fast as they possibly could? Probably not. But you don't always need to grow as fast as you possibly can. Sometimes it's okay to just have healthy, easy plants.
Right. I'm the poster child for healthy, easy plants.
Yeah, it doesn't always need to be more complicated than that. So yes, maybe EI dosing is the peak of it. I will never do it.
I will never do it either.
Mm-mm.
Charles, are you going to do EI dosing?
Nope.
No.
Nope.
It's a little rant, but you can get so purist about planted aquariums, and there are a million ways to make it work. You can make it work on just fish poop.
I think we have to remember when it comes to plants that there are plants that we use in aquariums that grow in shallow seasonal ponds in Central Africa. There are plants we use in our aquariums that grow in waterfalls in Borneo. There are plants we use that grow in fast-flowing rivers in South America and slow-growing rivers in South America. And all of those plants are evolved to grow under different conditions. There's not an umbrella for every plant.
And sometimes it's the same plant. I mean, look at Madagascar lace plants.
Right.
They can grow in slow-flowing warm water streams or fast-flowing alpine streams that dry out a couple of times a year.
Yeah.
There's so much variety and so much adaptability when it comes to particularly aquatic plants that you get a lot of wiggle room in ways to keep them healthy.
I think you did a great way to sum it up right there. Because we just talked about the variety of ecosystems in which plants come from, which means there's the variety of aquariums in which you can grow plants.
Uh-huh.
All kinds of different. Can we find a plant for your aquarium unless you've filled it with herbivorous lawnmowers?
And even in some cases, when you've filled it with certain herbivorous lawnmowers, you might be able to make it work.
Yeah. But otherwise, we can find some plants that will grow in your tank.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Or
agree.
we can design a tank, help you design a tank that you could grow anything. Well, just about anything.
Yeah. So if you have a whatever cheap tank you bought for your kid and now you saw a video on Instagram and you want that, no, you might not be able to grow dwarf hairgrass.
Right.
But let me sell you some dwarf sagittaria and it's going to take off.
Yep.
It's grassy. It'll be fine.
And it'll look cool. Mm-hmm. It'll make your shrimp happy. Make your kids happy. Well, there we have it. That was a kind of a little bit of a ranty, go off in all kinds of different tangents discussion, but I think it was a pretty fun one.
I think that was the point of this discussion,
It was,
actually,
yeah.
was we want a podcast to rant about.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like a lecture, but some of these are things that we need to be constantly reminding ourselves as well.
Right.
Like,
Right.
hey, guess what? If you want a perfect aquarium, you got to work for it. You don't want to work for it? This is the one you get to have. Make it beautiful.
And, there's the teasers for our upcoming podcast. We're going to do a podcast on the LED lights we use and why and what applications. And I think we should do a podcast on soil.
That would.
or substrate. We'll say substrate, but get just all into substrate.
I love some substrate. I could talk about that for an hour.
Keep your hands dirty. Oh wait, I thought we were keeping our hands wet. Well, check out the YouTube videos. Charles referenced a number of them. He does do an amazing job researching all kinds of stuff that Amy and I just don't have time for and really aren't going to bother with anyway.
We just get it to unpack the boxes and look at the pretty things.
I know, exactly. Follow us on Instagram, follow us on YouTube, or subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're getting close to having getting close to 500 on there. Mm-hmm. So let's get us to that 500 if you will, please. It'd be fun.
Yeah, we so appreciate all of you for all your support, all of your questions, all of your comments. Please keep sending them. At any of the social media that Ben mentioned, but you can also send me some comments, concerns, questions to podcast@watercolorsaquariumgallery.com, and I'd be happy to talk with you about them. Episode suggestions are always accepted because we had to wing this one a little bit.
A little bit, yeah. Come in the shop and check out some of our planted tanks. We kind of have examples of all of these because that's how we sell plants.
We're also in the process of redesigning a few of them. So, if it's been a while, it might be time to check them out.
That's right.
Always got fun stuff going on.
And always have lots of fun. Thanks for listening. Let's keep those hands wet.